Picture a dying fire in the deep prehistoric night where an old, frail figure sits silently cradling a sleeping child. When we look back at the brutal dawn of our species, we see something impossible to ignore. This shadowed silhouette should not exist here, representing a profound absurdity of nature in a world that only rewarded the fast and the young. Yet, in that quiet, deliberate act of holding on, we witness the exact moment we forged our ultimate weapon, a secret strength that all of us have completely forgotten. That image forces us to ask a question that cuts to the very center of our existence. How did we survive? Look at us. We are, by every biological measure, a remarkably weak species. We do not have the speed to outrun predators. We lack the armor to withstand a strike. We do not possess claws or venom to dominate a primal landscape. In the brutal mathematics of nature, weakness means death. That is the rule. The young and the strong survive. The old and the frail are left behind. That is the deal. Every other creature on this planet accepts this absolute reality, but we did not. Somewhere in the deep past, we broke the fundamental law of the wild. We survived not because of our physical strength, but because of a choice. Why are we the ones who inherited the earth? The answer is hiding in the shadows. Let's understand something. We like to tell ourselves a very specific story about how we conquered this planet. We believe it was our violence that saved us. We assume that our ancestors dominated because they learned to sharpen stones into spears, because they learned to harness the destructive power of fire, or simply because they developed a massive, calculating brain. We think early human survival was about outsmarting and outkilling the predators in the dark. That is the assumption. Fast, logical, cold, and almost entirely wrong. Because the biological reality of nature tells a completely different story. In the wild, when an animal loses its physical strength, when a female can no longer reproduce, the pack moves on. They become a liability, a drain on resources. Left to the predators, the weak are discarded. But we did not do that. Long before we forged blades to pierce flesh, long before we mastered the flames to keep the shadows at bay, long before we built walls to separate ourselves from the wilderness, we did something unthinkable. We kept our frail alive. We looked at those who could no longer fight or breed, and we refused to let the earth consume them. The secret to our survival was not forged in stone or fire. It was encoded in our blood. It is a biological anomaly that defies the ruthless logic of evolution, menopause. In almost every other species on Earth, when a female stops reproducing, her biological purpose ends. She dies. But human females do something extraordinary. They survive. They live for decades after their fertility fades. This is the grandmother hypothesis. The evidence shows a radical shift in our evolutionary trajectory. Instead of producing more vulnerable infants, older women stopped. They made a choice deeply embedded in our DNA. They shifted their labor. They foraged. They gathered roots, dug up tubers, and shared their food. They took the burden of care from exhausted mothers and placed it on their own shoulders. They fed their grandchildren. That single shift changed everything. The grandmother effect transformed us. A band of early humans with older women survived famines that wiped out others. The infants lived because someone else, someone who no longer had babies of her own, was entirely devoted to keeping them alive. It is a profound evolutionary strategy. Survival was not secured by the strongest hunter bringing down a mammoth. It was secured by a wrinkled woman returning to the fire with food, day after day, ensuring the next generation survived the night. This was our ultimate advantage. We did not conquer the planet through dominance or brute force. We conquered it through a network of extended care, through generations overlapping, through a system of survival that required the old to sacrifice their own biological drive to protect the young. Our greatest weapon was not a sharpened spear. It was the presence of a grandmother. It was love made fiercely practical and written deep into the very foundation of our human species. But here's where it gets complicated, because the reality of the natural world is entirely unforgiving. In almost every other corner of the animal kingdom, value is measured by a single, brutal metric: reproduction. When an organism loses its ability to breed, it loses its biological purpose. It becomes a liability, a drain on the limited resources of the group. The natural world does not tolerate dead weight. When the reproductive years end, the organism is simply left to wait for death. That is the cold, mathematical law of evolution. If this is making you rethink what it means to be human, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Let's not romanticize this. Nature is horrifyingly efficient. The fact that we did not follow this rule is profoundly strange. We rebelled against the very system that created us. We took the individuals that nature deemed completely worthless, the ones whose biological clocks had finally run out, and we made them the very center of our survival strategy. While the rest of the wild abandoned their old to the predators and to the cold, we decided to build our entire human future firmly around their fading, aging physical bodies instead. Let us move forward in time, because the story does not end in prehistory. Look at the modern world, where we have largely settled on a new structure, and we pretend we have figured it out. We professionalize aging. We put our elderly in nursing homes, in quiet rooms with scheduled meals and medical supervision, separated from the chaotic, noisy lives of the young. We have turned care into an industry, removed it from the home, from the family, from the hands of the people who share their blood. We prioritize the fast, the independent, the relentlessly productive. We still convince ourselves this is progress. We still push the old to the margins of our society. We still forget that breaking the intergenerational family dismantles the exact biological safety net that saved our species. We still ignore the uncomfortable truth that by isolating the old, we are starving ourselves of the primal connection that made us human. We are the species of intergenerational sacrifice. That has always been true. The question is whether we still understand the profound strength of that ancient bond. Think back to that dying fire in the deep prehistoric night. The frail, aging shadow who refused to let go, who chose to cradle the sleeping child instead of surrendering to the wilderness. That quiet, deliberate act of defiance is the only reason we are alive today. But the haunting truth remains. As our modern fires burn out and the world grows relentlessly colder, who will be left to hold us in the dark?